Coming up on the American Muscle Car, with 455 cubic inches of Buick Gran Sport power pushing you back in the driver's seat, wouldn't you really rather have a Buick? This program is about Buicks. So what are we doing at the drag strip? Oh yeah, right. This was the muscle car era, and everybody wanted to play, even Buick. Buick's corporate image wasn't exactly performance-oriented. Actually, it was anything but. But the muscle car wars caused a lot of weird things to happen among Detroit's automakers. And not even Buick could overlook a fired-up youth market with thousands of dollars to spend on cars that would give them the good old stoplight rocket ride. If Buick was going When Buick got into the muscle car game, one thing was for sure. Buick's muscle car would be all Buick. And as everybody knows, Buick is where better cars are built. Thus was born the Skylark GS.
When Buick released the Gran Sport in 1965, it was a rush-to-market product to compete with the GTO. You got to remember that Pontiac literally caught everybody asleep when they came out with the GTO, and everybody scrambled to come up with a car or a package similar to the GTO. Buick's version was called the Gran Sport. It was based on the A-body, just as the GTO was. It had a little better trim package. It was based on the Skylark model, a little better trim package.
Muscle cars are made by putting big engines in lightweight bodies.
Get these big cars down the road. Well, the younger guys found out that it also do pretty good wheel spin, and that made for a pretty impressive display at the drive-ins on Friday and Saturday night.
A friend of mine in '65 his dad had a '65 Gran Sport, and we used to love to get it out on the highway. It had 2-speed automatic in it, and it wouldn't come out of low gear, which is first gear, until 105 miles an hour. We had a lot of fun with that one too.
All Gran Sports were built on the Skylark convertible frame, a more rigid, heavy-duty chassis than the hardtop frame. The Gran Sport option package also contained upgraded brakes and suspension, wide tires and wheels, and those all-important GS badges everywhere. The GS option added $200.53 to the cost of your Skylark in 1965. And since the GTO and the 442 had been so successful with a little over-the-top marketing, Buick's ad men tried a little hot rod advertising of their own.
The '65 Skylark GS was a big departure for Buick, and so was the advertising campaign that the car appeared in. The '65 ad called the Skylark GS a howitzer with windshield wipers. Buick knew the market they were going after.
Buick sold 15,780 Skylarks in 1965, roughly 1/4 the number of GTOs sold that year. In a company like GM, though, where success is measured by selling hundreds of thousands of cars per year, it was plain to see that Buick's main emphasis was still on the big luxury models. The GM Intermediates were due for another redesign in 1966, and muscle car buyers flocked to the showrooms. The '67 Gran Sports could have been called more of the same, only faster. With minor trim changes, the '67s looked like the '66s, but there were major developments under the hood. The nailhead was gone. For 1967, Buick's engineers rolled out their brand new 400 cubic inch engine. Still following the decades-old Buick philosophy of producing horsepower at low RPMs, this engine was rated at 340 horsepower and 440 foot-pounds of torque at 2,800 RPM with a single 4-barrel Rochester Quadrajet carburetor. The 2-speed Buick Super Turbine 300 automatic transmission was finally laid to rest, replaced with a much heavier-duty Turbo-Hydromatic 400 3-speed. The standard rear axle ratios were still the very Buick-like 278 with the automatic and the 323 with the 4-speed, assuming you could get a 4-speed, that is. Don McIntosh found out just how difficult it was to get a Buick GS with a 4-speed transmission.
I went to every Buick dealership in Atlanta trying to buy this car, and no one had one on the lot, and no one would special order it for me. They all said that they couldn't order a 4-speed car. I was willing to put money down on it, and finally came to...
Axle ratio was standard in the posit-traction rear end. Buick claimed just a 10-horsepower increase with the Stage 1 from 340 to 350, but in actuality, it was quite a bit more than that. Buick kept right on with their philosophy of building engines to make good, usable street horsepower. The Stage 1 was a perfect execution of that philosophy. Word travels fast on the street, and very soon everyone knew about the Stage 1s. If you lined up against one of these, you had your work cut out for you. Stage 1 400s propelled the GS to quarter-mile times in the low 14s on street tires. On slicks with open exhaust, high 13s were a done deal. And if you could find any speed parts for the Buick engine, mid to low 13s were right there. The problem was there wasn't any speed equipment being made for Buicks.
Performance parts were not available for Buicks. The only thing that Buick offered over the counter was the camshaft and the heads.
This car has a Stage 2 engine upgrade on it. The Stage 2 engine upgrade was a dealer option that was purchased over the counter. It ups the torque on the engine, which was 510 pounds to start.
And with the Stage 2 heads, which were some beautifully engineered, beautifully designed heads that flowed exceptionally well, all of a sudden you've got a Buick that's going out on the drag strip and just cleaning house. It was not unusual to see these cars in the 13s with just a little bit of tweaking.
When we return, Buick's ultimate supercar, the GSX. (1970) was a watershed year for the auto industry in America, particularly for those building high-performance cars, which was practically everybody. The lid had blown off on engine sizes. Ford had their Boss 429, Chrysler had their 426 Hemi, Chevy had their 454, and Pontiac, Buick, and Olds each had their own version of the 455. And you could still get premium gas for around 30 cents a gallon. It was the best of times. In 1970, the Wildcat engine was punched out to 455 cubic inches, and the Stage 1 heads and the other GS goodies were added.
The Gran Sport really came alive was in 1970 with the advent of the 455. Here was an engine that put out 510 foot-pounds of torque. I mean, this thing had more torque than a Hemi.
The Stage 1 455 was rated at 360 horsepower at a typically conservative 5,000 RPM and produced an astounding 510 foot-pounds of torque, the most torque of any American production car ever. This was the ultimate Buick muscle engine. Even with the Stage 1 455's astounding performance, the magazine writers called the car a sleeper. Buick owners wondered, what do we have to do to get some respect around here? So after 5 years of building Gran Sports, hundreds of thousands of cars sold, Buick finally got into the image game. They called it the GSX, and it was a bona fide, in-your-face road rocket.
Image was a big part of the muscle car scene, and the Buicks to this point had been very sedate. Tame colors, low-key badging on the exterior, but with the GSX, that changed. Big satin yellow paint job, big spoilers, bright wheels, big hood scoops, loud stripes. This was unlike any Buick that had come before.
The GSX was probably one of the best packaged and balanced muscle cars that came out of Detroit. Not only did it have a pretty intensive graphic package and a small wing in the back, it also had...
As the performance decades came to a close in the early 70s, gone were most of the really exotic high RPM cars. But the 71 Stage 1 455 with lower compression still had the power to create 13-second quarter miles. At the same time, conspiracy was afoot in the land. Its target, the American muscle car. But nobody would ever consider a Buick distressed merchandise. Despite its performance, Buick's heritage was quality and luxury, and there were advantages to not being so bold.
The Hemi Cuda, I really wanted one bad, but I found out that the insurance was going to cost me $1,200 a year, and this was back in 1970. I couldn't hack it. It was $257 a year for this.
All over America today, people come out to appreciate these great muscle cars. It's a chance for them to relive their youth and pass on to the next generation a piece of history.
I think, first of all, you've got to like cars and have some interest and be able to do some of the work yourself. And basically, it's a labor of love. Once you start a project like this, you've just got to carry it through and not try to rush the project. This one took 30 months. It was done mostly on the weekends in my garage, and I didn't try to press it to get it done in any special amount of time, but I wanted it done right, and I wanted to find the right parts, so I'd wait until I got the right parts before I'd finish the project.
Perhaps because they were such sleepers, or because Buick never built them in very great numbers, or perhaps because they were just such fine automobiles. Today, Gran Sports are more than muscle cars. They're classics.
I think that the 70 Gran Sport Stage 1, I think the GSX, are two very, very popular cars, very good restoration candidates, and I think that they will continue to appreciate in value.
Steve Schlater found this 71 convertible, and he and his father restored it to original condition.
The car sat for many years, had the top down, it stayed in the garage, it was garage, and it was used basically as a storage bin. Look at the floor pans were in, excellent condition, bottom of the doors were in real good shape. Had a little bit of rust on the quarters, which is typical for a Buick. Went through the motor itself, just blueprinted it, put it back to stock, and our goal was to get it done for the Buick GS Nationals, which was in the 1st of May. We broke the motor in on the way down there, and we won first place in the 1971 Buick GS convertible class. Getting out, driving it, and being able to mash the accelerator down and just feeling the noise, the wind, it's just what a feeling, you get a lot of attention with the different people looking at it. It's just a blast.
The GS was a wonderful contradiction, awesome speed and opulent luxury, the kind of car only Buick could build. Buick's guarantee never changed. If you drove a Buick, you drove class. Like they said, wouldn't you really rather have a Buick? Thanks for watching, and we hope you'll be with us again on the next episode of the American Muscle Car. Remember, don't crush them, restore them.